Have you ever pondered how the great powers of Europe held the tide of revolution at bay after the fiery havoc of the French Revolution? This story takes us back to the early 19th century, a period that would reshape Europe in ways that reverberated through generations. It was 1815, and the dust of France's tumultuous upheavals was beginning to settle, but the fear of revolution spread was palpable among European rulers. Enter the Vienna settlement, a series of meetings intended to stitch Europe back together after years of war. This wasn't just about patching up territories, it was about creating a durable peace that could withstand the shocks of future rebellions. But peace required more than just agreements on paper. It called for an enforced stability throughout the continent, a daunting task indeed. This is where the story of Prince Metternich takes center stage, transforming this era into what is often called the Age of Metternich. He envisioned a league of European rulers policing and preserving the settlement. An ambitious, perhaps audacious idea. But who was this Metternich? Not just any politician, he was an influential chancellor of the Austrian Empire, often seen as the mastermind behind Europe's attempt to suppress the revolutionary spirit. Surprisingly, his broad view of European affairs wasn't just from sitting at the high tables of power. Metternich was born in the Rhineland and had spent years as an ambassador in France, giving him a unique perspective on European politics. This great European, as he saw himself, believed the revolutionary fire could only be extinguished through a collective effort spanning the continent. Meanwhile, this period was a real test between two distinct approaches to handling the specter of revolution. One approach was what some called riding the tiger, where governments would introduce moderate reforms to placate the rising demands for change. Britain during the 1820s, 1840s, exemplifies this path, where a raft of social and political reforms allowed the aristocracy to retain power by winning the support of the burgeoning middle classes. On the flip side, there was Metternich favoring the stem, the torrents approach. He was deeply skeptical of revolutions, famously stating, "All revolutions are lies. They destroy but do not create." His strategy was to preemptively quash the conditions leading to revolutions. No half measures. The goal was to halt the very currents of change. Metternich's influence, however, was not without contention. Balancing the divergent views and interests of various European powers was like juggling fire. The unity required to maintain his system proved fragile, and the landscape of European politics too complex. With the Austrian Empire itself, a patchwork of languages and ethnicities, governing was inherently challenging. Metternich's grand plan of a controlled, stable Europe was ambitious, but as history often shows, controlling the future is anything but straightforward. As we reflect on this epic chess game of political maneuvers, it's clear that the legacy of these strategies, from reform to stringent control, left indelible marks on European history. The age of Metternich was indeed brief, yet it was a critical moment that revealed the age-old tension between change and stability, a narrative that continues to shape our world today. Understanding Metternich's era is more than exploring a historical relic. It's about dissecting the eternal questions of power, revolution, and human aspiration for a better society. How far can and should leaders go to preserve the status quo? And at what cost? These questions, born in the concert halls of Vienna and the palaces of 19th century Europe, still resonate in the corridors of power today, reminding us that the echoes of the past are never really silent. Let's pause for a second and think about this. The Allies, having been somewhat generous initially, changed their approach drastically after Napoleon's brief return to power. It's as if they said, "Enough is enough," and decided to tighten the reins. Meanwhile, Metternich, often called the Doctor of Revolutions, was crafting his own methods to quell the fires of revolution and restore order. He championed the principle of legitimacy, insisting that monarchy was the way to go. He hoped for wise rulers and sage advisors, although, let's be honest, he knew the reality often fell short of that ideal. The Vienna settlement reflected this perspective. prominently by restoring monarchs to their thrones, banking on the belief that historical claims of royal families would provide stable governance. Another idea Metternich stood behind was the principle of intervention. Picture this: revolution as a disease, a contagion that could spread from one nation to another. To prevent the spread, Metternich argued that if a state felt threatened by uprisings abroad, it should have the right to intervene, ideally with a coalition of European powers at its back. This was not just about quashing revolutions, it was also about preserving the intricate balance of power that held Europe together. What's surprising is how practical considerations had to bend these principles at times. Take Germany, for example. Before the upheavals, it was a jigsaw of over 300 states. Imagine trying to restore all of these. Instead, they were consolidated into 39 states under the German Confederation. Austria, under Metternich's watchful eye, managed to secure a dominant role, steering the Confederation from the head of the table. Here, the principles met pragmatism, and pragmatism won. In terms of dealing out rewards and retributions, the settlement wasn't just about rolling back Napoleon's changes. It was also about rewarding the victors and punishing the losers more broadly. France, under Napoleon, had unsettled Europe drastically, and now, with the dust settling after his final defeat, the penalties imposed were severe. Territories were clipped, financial reparations were hefty. The message was clear: disturbances to the European order would not be tolerated lightly. Now, here's something concrete. Think about the impact of these penalties. Not only did they aim to weaken France to prevent future conflicts, but also to serve as a stark reminder of the consequences of challenging the established order. This punitive approach was a far cry from the earlier moderation discussed at Vienna. Political tides can turn quickly, and sometimes they bring heavy storms. In the grand tapestry that the Vienna settlement wove, Metternich's threads were unmistakably dominant. Through restoration, punishment, and carefully crafted diplomatic alliances, he aimed to secure a Europe where monarchy and stability reigned supreme. It's an intriguing thought amidst the political chaos of the time. There was a concerted effort to thread stability into the fabric of European politics, stability that would ideally last for generations to come. So, let's keep going on this journey through history. As we've seen, the pursuit of peace and stability can take many forms, from the strict reinstatement of monarchs to the strategic punishments of belligerent states. Each decision, each action taken at the Vienna settlement shaped the future of Europe, setting the stage for the complex interplay of power, politics, and peace. Quite fascinating, wouldn't you say? Continuing our exploration of the post Napoleonic geopolitical reshuffle, let's delve into how the territories were carved up, a process teeming with intriguing deals and diplomatic exchanges. Imagine this: Russia comes out significantly empowered, keeping its conquests like Finland, which it had snatched away from Sweden back in 1808, and Bessarabia from Turkey. But in a grand diplomatic gesture, Sweden was compensated with Norway, wrested from Napoleon's ally, Denmark. Picture the Tsar, now doubling as the King of Poland, presiding over a newly reconstituted Polish kingdom. Meanwhile, the pieces of the map shuffled further in Central Europe. Prussia might have lost a big chunk of Polish territory, but they didn't walk away empty handed. They were compensated richly, with 40% of Saxony, the Duchy of Westphalia, Swedish Pomerania, and most notably, much of the resource rich Rhineland. Austria, on the other hand, waved goodbye to the Austrian Netherlands, now reimagined as Belgium. In return, the Habsburgs secured Lombardy and Venetia in northern Italy, along with Illyria and Dalmatia, marking their stretch down the Adriatic coast, and not forgetting the Bavarian Tyrol. What's surprising is Britain's strategic play. Opting out of European land grabs, Britain focused on bolstering its naval might. They acquired pivotal naval bases and trading posts, securing spots like Heligoland, Malta, the Ionian Islands, Ceylon, and Cape Colony, a true embodiment of their maritime priorities. That's it for today's episode on Fun Learn Talks. where stories from business, technology, and history keep your curiosity alive. If you enjoyed the journey, make sure to follow, rate, or share it with a fellow curious mind. And hey, we'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment or connect with us online. I'm Anu, and I'll catch you next time, right here on Fun Learn Talks. Until then, keep learning, keep wondering.